Greetings, Minecrafters, and welcome to episode 11, Being Good Enough in a Crisis. So, last week I had said that that was a beautiful segue into our next one about the stress response versus challenge response, because this is also a mindset, how we view stress as a positive or negative thing. And now I'm going to bump that up till next week because I want to respond to my listeners. I've been getting people, kind of asking me about being enough in a crisis. Parents and college students and be at work and all kinds of ways during this crisis where people have just been killing themselves to do their best and coming up empty, feeling depleted and exhausted and not feeling enough. And so I was having a chat yesterday with one of my uh, colleagues in marketing, fabulous, very intelligent woman. And you know what? I thought I'm just going to kind of listen to what's going on around me and do that this week because it kind of seems like that's what's in the air right now. So we're going to talk about what it means to feel enough during a crisis. So please stay with me because we're going to try to cover, as many, sort of situations as we can. Our conversation yesterday was about parents in general, just not feeling enough. And it was in the context of within the college situation and wanting their seniors in high school to go off and have this traditional college experience and that sort of changing. And we were also talking about parents of young kids at home. And when, the world closed down, let's call it what it is, right? The world closed down, schools closed down, and kids were sent home without their friends, without their routines, without being invited, being able to go to birthday parties. Never mind, this is baseball season, and I coached one of our kids' teams for a long time, and actually even ran the league for a while, and that's brutal, especially in this country where baseball is so loved. And how are parents doing overall? And the thing is, at least from what I'm hearing around me, again, it's in the air, is that even though these grown-ups know in their minds they're doing their best, they are not seemingly feeling that way, or that what they're doing is enough, that they're coming up short no matter what they do. And you know what? That's a lousy way to feel. I've mentioned it before. My husband and I have 5 wonderful young adults, and I mean, we'd all be lying if we didn't say there was a moment where we didn't feel like we came up short. And that's excruciating for a parent, who loves their kids. It's just excruciating. And when we have this moment of human, sometimes we just beat ourselves up. It just doesn't seem like, we give ourselves any slack. And if there was a time to be gentle with ourselves and give ourselves some slack, it's now. So perhaps we'll kind of start off with the college scene, and then we'll move, to parents of younger kids. You may have both, right? If this is your first child going off to school, you may have young ones at home who, in fact, I had one of my students just this last semester. Her family has both. So she was a graduating senior, and she has a sister who's graduating high school student. So their family, lost out on both of those things. And right now I'm thinking of on the parents' end and doing it enough. I'm thinking of another colleague whose oldest daughter is about to go off to school, and she got teary telling me this. She said, we've always wanted for our daughter to have this, traditional college experience. They've been looking for colleges, since she was halfway or earlier in her junior year, going through all the SATs and all that stuff, driving around the country, looking at, maybe not the country, let's say New England, because I don't know that for sure, but New England, driving around looking at different schools and, just being excited, bringing the siblings, making, little weekend trips out of it. And then, the bottom fell out of the world, like we said, and now that has changed. And at the time we were having this talk, it was probably maybe the end of March. So things had not even moved along as much as they have, at this point, and towards the end of May. And you know, they don't she and her husband don't know what this looks like. They don't know if they want their daughter to be, at her school choice, which, isn't right in town here. And do they want her, more than a couple hours away? Do they even want her in a dorm in close proximity to all these other students? And the answer is, in theory, yes, they do, because they wanted the traditional college experience for her. And now things have changed, right? Because what if there's another outbreak of this COVID nasty germ? And she's, there for 3 weeks and she gets sent home. Then what? Or should they just have her wait for a year? Not what they want. This kid's a high roller. She's taking APs and AP classes, and excited to get to school. Um, though now a lot of students who are high rollers, like my colleague's daughter, a lot of them, taking the AP classes, maybe some early college credits, just so excited to go off and learn. Now, so some of them are like, maybe I should wait a year. And couple that with, in general, even pre-pandemic or whatever, the this age range, the 18 to 23 to 25 age range, is when most mental health issues kind of surface and sometimes erupt, let's say. So they're already in that range. And now, now we're faced with a pandemic. So as far as, parents feeling enough, my colleague and I were talking about, parents wanting this experience for them, parents trying their very best to figure out what to do with their, aspiring first year, what to do, what is the best thing to do. And any of you out there who are parents, even if your kids are young right now, you still know the feeling of, obviously, wanting to protect them, wanting the best for them. And that is not always an easy choice, because a good parent, obviously, as a good parent, we need to do what they need, not necessarily what they want, right? And that doesn't change from the time they're born right up through, young adulthood and maybe even into adulthood. We go from kind of making choices for them when they're little to helping them make choices. And this is not always easy. So doing our best now can look very, very different, because, and anybody knows with the teenagers and young adults, even though they're becoming independent, they are still looking for us to help make decisions, especially in a time like this when no one knows what's going to happen. And it's just plain freaking hard. And this is actually where the conversation kind of came up with my colleague, because we were talking about, sort of how anxious this generation already is. We know that, that's just, there's all kinds of things written about that. All of you, I'm sure, well aware, as are, the 18 to, early 20 somethings, the iGens or Gen Zs, depending on where look that up, because they're called different things. They are the most anxious and depressed generation the United States has ever seen, before the COVID thing. So now, throwing a pandemic into the mix, and we've now got a really, really anxious generation of young adults. So again, this context was in that we were talking about a gap year, because some students choose to take gap years anyway. And I'll tell you, our college has done something very cool and innovative, and it is not my point in this podcast to, advertise or market that or anything, even though it's a fantastic program that, I had fun being a part of. For the sake of this is honestly and truthfully just having a discussion. So, and it's just a good idea. So the gap year at Champlain College, where I teach, is about this. We kind of came up with something for students like my other colleague there, whose daughter, had intended to go off and have this, traditional college experience. Now nervous. It's a virtual gap year. It's kind of about slowing down and moving forward, I guess is the best way to say it. Slowing down, because so many students and their parents are anxious due to this pandemic, while also moving forward and continuing to be productive and to gain or maintain that positive momentum that is needed to be successful both in the academic and professional worlds. So it's got the well-being course. I teach Minecraft, which is so much fun, and then it's got all this professional stuff. It's got internships, and it's all very structured, and it's virtual, not online. There is a difference. So the classes are taught over Zoom, where you're actually looking at each other and interacting and all of that. And the working part of it, the internship part of it, is also virtual, and there are speakers, and it's a fantastic thing. So that's kind of what we were talking about was, some students are going to need something like this for a reason to get up in the morning if their parents and themselves choose to take that year to kind of wait this thing out. And the idea is we don't want to, you don't want to take a year and have them just stop. I mean, that is just not a good plan. So this is where the whole conversation came up with about the being enough thing. And this, having a reason to get up in the morning is important for all of us. Okay, stopping isn't good for anyone. Never mind a young adult or seasoned adult or even child, right, who is already feeling anxious and depressed. It's a much, much better idea, even if we're slowing down because of, we need to right now. It's just so important to keep moving forward. And this wraps up into doing our best too, because when we are moving forward, there's some little closures that happen with accomplishment. And accomplishment is something that is very, very, very important in positive psychology also. And of course, as part of, I like to bring up Marty Seligman, one of my faves and the father of positive psychology, when he talks about PERMA, right? That's an acronym. So the positive emotion, essential. Engagement, absolutely essential. The R is for relationships. We know that healthy, positive relationships are the number one for living the long life, longest life, and also the most high quality life possible. And then the M is for meaning. Without a sense of purpose and meaning, it's a straight road to depression. So that rolls into our conversation also. And the A is for accomplishment. So I brought that up in relation to the gap year because, it's kind of got accomplishment rolled right through that. It's just embedded in this slow down, move forward kind of plan. All right, so back to the feeling enough part, right? We've got parents of college students going off to college as first years. We've also got parents, there obviously can be some overlap here. Our kids are a little less than 2 years apart for the most part. So we had three kids in college at once. So you may have that situation too. But basically, what we've got is a lot of stress and a lot of pressure, and parents trying so hard to do their best and not feeling enough. Now, we roll this into the job situation, right? So now I've been hearing from people also where I teach, a lot of parents are having huge financial uh, problems right now, just big stress with finances, and they may already have we have an aspiring junior right now. Actually, she's thankfully the last one of our five. The other four have graduated, having lots of financial pressure with losing jobs, maybe temporarily. Maybe people are saying that it's temporarily, but do we really believe that? I know a whole slew of people who have start dates that are a month from now, or 2 months from now, or 2 weeks from now. And do we ever really know, until it comes down to it, if that's going to stick? Are we really going back? That's stressful. And my husband and I are in our mid 50s. I'm 55. And we've got friends also that, if you're in that age range, that plays in too. Because what if I'm furloughed? They say I'm going back, then I don't go back. And now I'm 55. What am I going to do? Right. And now we're still trying to do for our college kids. We're still trying to be, the most stellar parent we can possibly be. And how are we doing that when underneath there's this slow burn or maybe medium burn or even inferno of fear about financially not being able to make ends meet. So parents are pivoting and shifting all over the place. And then we've also got a situation where we joke about it here because we've got our three young adult daughters home directly due to this pandemic thing. I think I mentioned that. Our youngest is home. Well, she would be at this point anyway, but home from school, and that's my aspiring junior. And our two young adult daughters were working in schools, and the schools closed down, so they're here too. So we joke about it being a lot of togetherness, and we can make light of that, and still, trying to do what's right by all of them. They were young adults out in their lives, being free and independent, and now they're back, and we love having them back. And it's been, sometimes it's hard to balance that, make sure they still have their freedom, and trying to make that work too. And our youngest one has the personality. She's very outgoing. Was ripped out of her life then a sophomore a couple months ago. She had actually just pledged a sorority. There was a big thing, and that didn't happen, obviously. Now she's back, and there are no jobs. We live in small town Vermont, so that's a challenge anyway. And she's been able, thankfully, to work the past few years, making decent money for a summer job at a local ski resort, and which is now shut down. And there's not much where we live. And I know from my students who live in more urban areas that there isn't much for them either. They've got grocery store options, but there are very, very few jobs, and lots of young adults for very few jobs. So parents, are left like myself and my husband running around trying to figure something out for them, or to help them figure something out. And, there's a real challenge to keep them busy and feel like we're coming up short. And I don't mind sharing with you, my own pivot, because I'm teaching a couple of online classes right now. And I know parents, this will relate. A lot of you can relate with this because with our living space, we are again pivoting with having three of our awesome young adults home, and I'm trying to teach online, and there is nowhere for me to go in this house. It's a decent sized house, but there are currently five of us here, and with the floor set up, we also have Wi-Fi issues downstairs, so it's taken me. I can get about 10% done in the time I would have had all of it done, and so it's taking a lot more time to get to the same place, and that's no one's fault. It's just it's just how it is. There's somebody walking around in conversations, and our youngest has music on all the time, and that's one challenge, and I'm for sure that many of you listening can relate to the work situation at home. And my husband, who was used to working at least 65 hours a week at his job, and he loves where he works also, he's here trying to work online, and we make jokes about the corporate complex in the upstairs living room, where he's at the dining room table, I'm on the couch. Sometimes he has conference calls, and the whole house has to be quiet. And we're all trying to get this done, and trying to stay connected when we feel so disconnected, all at once in the same small space. And then relating that to the parenting piece, we've got our youngest, who's a mover and a groover like her mom, and she just doesn't do well when she doesn't have structure. She just doesn't. And she, was sleeping in very, very late. And obviously college kids do that, but usually after a few days, they kind of bounce back after their semester. And she wasn't bouncing, she was just sleeping later and later. And it just was not good just not good mental health wise. And so now, on top of teaching online, trying to juggle with my husband, who literally sits 20 feet away from me in the same house, trying to hush up when he's on a call and all this, we've got to keep her busy. So thankfully she's handy, and we have her. We would have had to pay for someone to do the deck anyway, because our deck's a mess. So now I get her up like clockwork at 7:45. That's what we kind of agreed on. And she's been busy all day, every day. And now the pressure is going to be back once this project's over to come up with another one for her, because she absolutely has to stay locked in to, a structured something in order for her to kind of, have her own optimal well-being going on. And it's working. And again, as a parent, we're trying to juggle all this again while we're also trying to do our own jobs. And I can feel like I'm, not enough sometimes, and I need to do more for her. So we have the online stuff. If you have two partners or partners and kids trying to be online and do your work slash schoolwork. And then if you're the chef in the house, okay, which I also am, so I can relate to this, is keeping things interesting and being creative. And fortunately, I enjoy cooking, so that's not too terrible. And though, it's a lot on top of, again, the working online, and keeping everybody busy in a small living space, and also keeping them from, killing each other. So now, speaking of kids killing each other, if you're a parent who has young ones home, okay, and you're trying to do your job virtually now, and or again furloughed, and now with the schools closing, elementary and middle school, that's kind of almost two separate conversations because teenagers obviously add just a whole nother uh, complex element to it. And now, in addition to all the other things good parents do, just all of it, right? Now you're homeschooling, which is not maybe not what you signed up for. People homeschool, who choose it, and they're all over it and into it, and they look it all up and what to do. Well, that isn't the case for, I would say, most people, right? And this was just kind of dropped on parents almost overnight. And now, in addition to being, thrown into working online ourselves, or not, with that fear of not working at all, and now having to get unemployment or whatever, um, and all the stress that comes on with the financial scarcity. Now we've got to teach you know kindergarten, first, second, fourth, fifth, sixth, eighth graders online all day, and not only that, they don't have any structure. They don't have the lunchroom, the cafeteria buzz, the playground, their friends, kickball out, especially now that it's nice out. They're missing all of that. And parents are left with the responsibility of somehow, some way, putting that back the best we can. And that certainly is no easy, it's just not an easy thing to accomplish, to try to put this back for them. So if we think about all of this creative energy that needs to come from the parent or parents, if you're fortunate enough to have two parents in the household, either way, it's a lot of creative energy that is expected to come from us, to kind of, like, I keep using the word pivot because with this, it makes me think of being a shortstop, as I love baseball so much, like in like shortstop, quick pivot move to that fast ball, you know, thrown at you, and having to come up with all kinds of ideas to maintain the closest thing we can to what their school environment was like. Exhausting. We love them, absolutely, and it's still hard. We weren't ready for this. No one was. And for any of you who have read the book The Giving Tree, which I know a lot of people are fans of, I'm not. But that really isn't my point here. And my point is, if you have read it, we can often feel like the giving tree at the stump level. We've got a whole lot of parents out there right now feeling like they just don't have anything left, or very little left to give, because we're giving all we have every day, and with a very little opportunity to and rejuvenate and recharge our batteries. And this is, thankfully, it's getting nicer out now, so that's gotten a little easier. But mid March or early March, it was started. It's midwinter, let's say, and it's really hit the fan. I'd say maybe mid March, and we've been going like the ever ready bunny. And for many of us, instantly having no space to call our own, and even the most extroverted person and most outgoing person needs some space. Never mind the introverts, not having space. We've had no space to call our own, no time to call our own. Very, very difficult to recharge our batteries. And though it's often cliche, it's very true about the parents on an airplane, right? When the flight attendant does the whole thing with the oxygen mask, and they explain very clearly to put the oxygen mask on you first. Otherwise, you are no good to your toddler or to an older person. And again, though cliche, this is spot on accurate. And in this crisis situation, it's been very, very, very difficult to put the oxygen mask on ourselves first. And this has had even the best parents walking around feeling depleted and more than just tired, probably past exhaustion into fatigued, and then getting up and doing it again the next day when it already feels like each day is running into the next because we don't have the structure we're used to having. And good parents are walking around kind of in zombie mode, feeling like they're falling short when they're giving everything they've got. And this has me thinking of Donald Winnicott back in the 50s and came up with the theory of the good enough mother, which will now transfer to good enough parent. That was the 50s, of course, right? So, and basically, in a very paraphrased nutshell, he came up with this idea that, and with research, right, that children slash teenagers slash young adults slash now adults, okay, really do very, very well and grow up as these, happy, well-adjusted people when the parent or parents were just plain good enough. It means you did the best you could, including the moments of falling short or snapping out of complete exhaustion, okay? But if let's say the high majority of the time you were responsive and affectionate in meeting the needs of your child, that child's gonna be just fine. So the majority of the time doesn't mean all the time. Perfect is a bar we couldn't reach if we wanted to. So it's much better to lower that and lower it even more during a pandemic, and really and truly to do the best we can, knowing that our kids will be okay. They know on some level, even if they're little, they can just smell it, that we are there for them, even when we snap or forget something. The arts and crafts didn't come in the mail, and we had to come up with something else that wasn't as exciting. Whatever. That again, even with the grumpiness, that they will be fine. I remember when I learned about this theory way back in graduate school at Boston College, and even at whatever I was, 24 years old at the time, not a parent yet, not even engaged yet, though I think close. I was right around that time. I remember I remember just thinking to myself, wow, this is going to stick with me. I'm keeping this. I loved the idea of kind of permission from somebody who had done all this research, knowing that, kids, teenagers, turn out just fine when most of the time you were good enough. And it stuck with me from back then, right? So this is a good thing. And if there were ever a time to be gentle with ourselves and cut ourselves some slack, knowing they'll be okay, it's now. Of course, this whole pandemic thing has been a challenge for anyone, even, for let's say neurotypical parents. So add in parents who have mental health issues themselves, anxiety, depression, ADHD, which is actually more neurodevelopmental, but whatever wiring difference. And then we can say, and might have a child home who has, obsessive compulsive thinking patterns or ADHD herself or whatever. And just think how much that further adds into the mix. I have a friend actually who does very well managing her wiring of bipolar. I don't like the word disorder. I just delete that because it's a shame word and I don't like that. So her wiring, she's a dynamite person, very intelligent. She has kids at home. And I can only imagine how much more difficult it's been, to manage all the rest of what we just spoke about with a wiring difference, such as bipolar, and with my own ADHD. It's really it's been taking extra energy and extra planning, extra communicating, to try to get things in line so that I can, function the best I can during, with all these big changes going on. It's been different, definitely. And I can share with you that I've had, plenty of parents come to my various workshops, on the obsessive compulsive thinking, managing the monkey mind or the anxiety or depression, whatever. And some of them come there for themselves. Some of them have come there because just to be, be more efficient working with students or whatever. And some of the parents have been very open about coming to these various workshops because they have a child or a teenager with obsessive compulsive thinking and tendencies, or they've got a child who's constantly, often teenagers, not feeling enough for whatever reason. So add the mental health into the picture with the parent herself or himself, or dad and dad, or whomever. And now they're at home with the schools being closed, and they've got a child with ADHD or obsessive compulsive thinking or whatever, fill in the blank, and just think of the magnitude, that adds to this whole thing with needing to step up even more and pivot even more due to the mental health challenges also. And this is a circumstance for absolutely positively sure parents and also to convey it to your kids that the doing the best we can thing is real. It's not just cliche and it's not just in books. We really, 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 really need to acknowledge when there is a wiring difference to give us further permission to cut ourselves some slack. Absolutely, positively. And to be kind and gentle with ourselves, realizing that this is what we can do right now. And though any of the various wiring differences, can add some extra challenge to this whole pandemic thing. Certainly, when I think of the obsessive compulsive thinking patterns of parents, kids, teenagers, that how much tougher this is for anyone struggling with this, because now in all these rituals that people that struggle with obsessive compulsive thinking, all these rituals that they're doing to and learning how to, you know, stop doing and, reduce and stop doing so that something bad doesn't happen, are now being reinforced in the external world. If I touch this doorknob, if I don't wash my hands 5 times, if I don't, it's all being reinforced because the entire world now has been kind of forced into um, obsessively, compulsively wearing masks and gloves and hand washing and sanitizing. And obviously, I'll be very good, a disclaimer here, not that obviously the OCT, obsessive compulsive thinking, always has to do with, germs, being afraid of, being unclean. That's obviously one way it can manifest. And at the same time, any of the other rituals that are going on, flipping on light switches or whatever it is that the person struggles with, is probably much, much harder right now because the world at large has had to engage in all these rituals to stop something bad from happening. Very, very tough for somebody who struggles with obsessive compulsive thinking. We've done a lot of talking throughout these podcast episodes about, you know, uh, thoughts thoughts coming first and feelings coming second, and how what we think greatly affects how we feel. And we've also talked a lot about mindfulness. And somebody right now, a parent during this pandemic, might be wanting to say to me right through the computer system, in the air and everything else, electrons, are you nuts? Be present in the moment. I don't want to be in my moment. I'm just trying to survive. Well, the thing is, there's a whole lot more to mindfulness than you know, uh, being a Buddhist monk sitting crisscross applesauce, as my kids would say, chanting. There's lots more. And one part of mindfulness is also about self compassion and showing ourselves the kind of love we would give someone else. And, especially as a parent, and again, I've had 5, especially as a parent, it's so easy to forget that we count it all because we're so used to putting our kids first, which is obviously what good parents do. And at the same point, it comes back to the oxygen mask thing because we do count. We absolutely count. And whether we like it or not, we also have needs. And even if they're few and far between, we all need to catch our breath. Even the best parent in the world needs to catch his or her breath. And right now comes to mind. I'm thinking of two different situations. One when I was in Burlington at a Barnes and Noble, and the parents came in and they had an adorable little boy who was clearly nonverbal and quite possibly on the autism spectrum. And they were trying so hard to have, quote unquote, a regular day out. Sunny Saturday, people buzzing all around. Back when the bookstores were a little more present, and they were trying so hard to just to be a family and have this nice day. And I just watched them go from following him around because he was just having a hard time, probably with all the buzz and people and activity, and knocking things over. And then he was self-stimming in the middle of the floor and rocking. And they, even though I didn't appear that anyone cared around them, certainly we didn't. He was absolutely a beautiful child. And that you could tell that they, by their faces, that they were just so full of stress and exhaustion, and may have been a little embarrassed. And being at home with a child who's got severe physical needs, maybe, and maybe nonverbal, having a lot more extreme things. And now the school's closed, and the parent who was working is home now, and that the only break they got was when their child was at school and or when they were at work, and now that's gone. And I think, if like the physical part of managing all that and trying to manage all that, it really, overnight, basically, we didn't have a lot of notice for, a pandemic and schools shutting down, is emotionally how that parent, that exhausted, past exhausted, fatigued, chronically fatigued parent is feeling, because they love their child. Again, it could be, severe physical limitations or whatever. And then becoming maybe resentful about the situation and the cards they were dealt, then feeling guilty about feeling resentful about the cards they were dealt, because they love their child so much, and they're feeling badly for feeling badly. Okay, we call those secondary emotions. In fact, this brings to mind a very spineless squirrel moment, as I like to say, when I was hosting up at a local ski resort here, well, it's like 8 or 9 years ago, and at a restaurant, and this family came in with these two adorable little boys. These parents looked so far past fatigued, I don't even think I can come up with a word for it. And the older boy was probably maybe 10, I'd say, little freckles, absolutely adorable. And their other little guy was about 7 or 8, and he was in a custom made wheelchair where he was kind of almost like like in a recline kind of position. He clearly was nonverbal. Didn't even have a voice board. Actually, he was very severe. I'm not sure what happened with him. And I went over to bring them menus, and the dad almost made I'm going to say put a joke in quotes because none of this was funny, obviously. I think he was trying to lighten up things or something. And he said, "Oh, it's okay. We only need 3 menus. He doesn't need one. He brought his dinner," or something like that. And I didn't know what to do. I just kind of smiled at them, and I don't remember what I said at this point. It was almost a decade ago. But just me being friendly and bringing things up. And when I went back into the kitchen, I just had to stop for a second, and I was just so full of trying in my head. I mean, just to empathize, my heart just broke down the middle, because you watched the older brother, his face just had said it all. This is my life, and these parents are trying everything. It took everything these parents had to take care of the younger brother, and obviously his situation wasn't going to change. And I can only imagine how many parents out there have a situation that's similar with severe physical needs. Or it also might be an aging parent. It doesn't necessarily have to be a child, but then emotionally, schools are closed down. Whatever support system was there now isn't, and now it's you overnight pivoting with such severe circumstances. And then again, the emotional piece of walking around, if it's not enough to do the best you can every day as a parent, to walk around feeling badly that no matter what you do, it isn't enough. And then, dealing with these emotions of feeling guilty for not being able to reach this bar that just wouldn't even be possible. And you know what? We call this human, not bad people. We call this human. So I teach a class on trauma in the summer, not every summer, but some summers. And there's a book I use by Rachel Goldsmith Turrow, and it's called Mindfulness Skills for Trauma and PTSD. And I tell you, there's some really good stuff in here. Right now we're talking about being good to ourselves, and for a parent who becomes conditioned, right? That's just a sexy word for learns or learning or whatever. We learn and get comfortable with just being robots, taking care of everybody, and certainly in a pandemic, with kids with special needs, young adults with special needs, aging parents, um, we get locked into this, just going day by day, and then it gets easier and easier to forget that we even exist in our own bodies. So Rachel talks about self-compassion. She says you can think of self-compassion as the practice of being kind, helpful, and an encouraging friend to yourself in any circumstance. Self-compassion is generous and unconditional. Self-compassion calls forth our most noble and caring qualities: courage, acceptance, patience, understanding, non-judgment, sympathy, soothing, and generosity. Self-compassion reflects an ability to acknowledge and remain present with whatever is happening inside us, even if the feelings are very painful. It adds the dimension of kindness to mindfulness skills as we practice relating to ourselves in a caring way no matter what happens. So I'm really hoping that my listeners who are parents out there, any parents with anything going on in this pandemic, no matter what, and listen and just hear this, okay? As we practice relating to ourselves in a caring way, no matter what happens. So again, it's really, really important to listen and validate, the feelings that you're having about, all the frustrations being at home with kids. And earlier, what we talked about with the young adults going off to college, or one you already have in college, and that's our story. One going back to being an aspiring junior. No matter what it is, to listen to yourself and not shove these feelings down or away, because quite honestly, that just brings forth shame, and that's the worst kind of toxicity there is. The feeling of being defective. The guilt's bad enough, but they're bringing that shame back, and feeling defective as a parent or person is absolutely not what we want. When these feelings do surface, are you fortunate enough to have a partner, best friend, sister, brother, whomever, somebody you can absolutely, is a safe person, an emotionally safe person to share these feelings and get them out and validate them. Because as Rachel says, self-compassion also reflects truly listening to everything that is occurring within us, as well as the genuine wish that the suffering be reduced. Because, if you remember from early episodes, one of the reasons I love mindfulness, besides I don't have to sit still because I think sitting's overrated, we can, be gardening, especially this time of year, doing whatever. And what I love most, in addition to being able to take it with us, is the non-judgmental piece. And it's especially easy for mothers to judge ourselves. We are our worst judges, actually. It's so easy to, measure ourselves up every single day against what we're not doing. And this actually I'm having a squirrel moment here, because I wasn't thinking of this till this minute, because it was so long ago. But my very first book that I wrote back in 2003, when I was right in it with 5 kids at home, and it's called Striving for the Purple Heart. And it's about mothers being in this constant pursuit of honor, mothers of all shapes and sizes, whether you gave birth naturally, whether you adopted, and how we are in this constant pursuit of honor, and doing what's absolutely best for our kids. And this is certainly, disclaimer, not discounting dads in any way. Dads are absolutely important. It's just I've only been a mother, so that's all I could really, write about. And when we start to get in this, this dark, nasty wormhole of, this heavy burden of guilt, which eventually can lead to shame and that feeling of being defective and not enough when we're such good people doing the best we can. It's then that we have to seek higher ground. And one way to do this is to practice. Remember, what we practice, we get better at, right? To practice showing ourselves kindness and self-compassion. And even in the midst of this uncertainty and insanity in some ways, this one day running into the next, like we've had through this whole thing, that Rachel talks about, we gotta stop. Even if being in the shower is the only time we get. And personally, again, I like to be mindful in the shower as much as possible. And then again, we're also in a place where we're doing the best we can right now just to hold it together. And so Rachel talks about our relationship with ourselves, and she says your relationship with yourself matters. It might seem surprising that the way we treat ourselves could do much to change our feelings. She says you already have a relationship with yourself, and then asks, what kind of relationship is it? Do you criticize yourself for faults or your feelings? Are you kind to yourself when things are hard? Do you treat yourself as well as you treat other important people in your life? That's an important one. Is your care for yourself contingent on how you are feeling or what happens? It's just been so easy for us, many of us, during this whole crisis thing to be like hamsters in a wheel. As we said, one day kind of running into the next without the structure, and we just get in this automatic mode of just taking more on and surviving, and as they say, sticking fingers in the dike or putting out fires, just getting used to this being a human doing instead of a human being. And the main theme here is to do the best we can, amidst the mishugas, right? Craziness, to step out of that the best we can, right? And to show ourselves some kindness, to seek higher ground, and if that's hard, to show kindness to yourself and compassion to yourself, and to validate these feelings. It's very important to ask ourselves, why is it hard for me to be kind and gentle and compassionate towards myself? As if this is the case, this is very, very, very worth exploring, and kind of doing like an archaeological dig to figure out why it's so hard, to show kindness to ourselves, and often so much easier to show kindness to other people. It might sound a little silly to think that, self-compassion takes courage, and it can take more courage for some than others, due to the backstory involved with that person. And, Rachel continues to say, self-compassion is brave because it involves staying with our pain rather than running from it. Instead of pushing difficulties away, we can acknowledge what we are feeling and keep ourselves company in the presence of those feelings. And self-compassion is obviously the opposite of self-criticism, which has a very strong connection to depression and anxiety. Whereas self-compassion, again, it's a skill, how much I love skills, we can learn and can help a lot with managing stress, has to do with motivation, and can also, is also an indicator, let's say, or an indicator of one's overall quality of well-being. So Rachel talks about one way to sort of cultivate this metta, what they call in the Buddhist tradition metta, which is loving kindness, is to repeat, sort of good wishes towards yourself and others. And she talks about the breath. We know how important that is because it's an immediate reset, bringing the mind back into the body from next Tuesday or yesterday or 2 years ago, or, away from your work date, which is scheduled for 4 weeks from now or whatever. It brings the mind immediately back into the body. And she talks about finding, a sort of a comfortable, compassionate name for yourself. And you might have a nickname, You might want to come up with a new nickname, or just my friend, or my dear, or anything that's a comfortable name for yourself. And on the inhale, just my friend, and then exhale, my friend. This is about yourself, right? My friend in, my friend out. And then to come up with some very short phrases. And some of the examples that Rachel uses are, inhale, my friend, exhale, my friend. Inhale, may I be safe. Exhale, may I be safe. Inhale, may I be happy. Exhale, may I be happy. Inhale, may I be healthy. Exhale, may I be healthy. Inhale, may I live with ease. Exhale, may I live with ease. As we talked about, there may be reasons that someone has a much easier time being kind to other people than they do to themselves. And the whole thing with mindfulness is we're not judging. Remember, we are not judging. If that's where you are right now in your life, that's okay. And remember that if we, kind of get that awareness, this aha, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. And she says, you know what? If it's easier for you to start this meta, because that's about self and others, well, then go ahead and start there. And, wish somebody, may so-and-so be safe, may so-and-so be healthy. And once we get into a more comfortable position of breathing in and breathing out and breathing in and breathing out, wishing a child, partner, somebody in another country, whatever, this loving kindness, then once we feel comfortable, we can bring that back into our own living room, meaning our own minds, right? And practice this loving kindness towards ourselves. And hopefully remember, for a few episodes ago, it's been a bunch of episodes ago at this point, John Kabat-Zinn, one of the greatest mindfulness gurus ever, says, if you're looking at mindfulness as something to add to your to-do list, just don't do it. You're not ready. Because we don't have to say, sit, stop, crisscross applesauce. We can be gardening, we can be running, we can be cooking, and just breathing in and breathing out and being aware, not judging ourselves, showing compassion. This is huge. And remember, again, what we rehearse or practice, we inevitably get good at. And this is so important to practice, sort of seeing, acknowledging, and hearing our own value. I can't say enough. We all have our own inherent value, and we need to, be able to get in a place where we can appreciate our own value. So this is our mantra for today. I am enough. Inhale. I am enough. For the parents, this is your mantra today, okay? I am a good enough parent. Breathe in. I am a good enough parent. Breathe out. I am a good enough parent. Breathe in. I am good enough. Breathe out. I am good enough. So I am very hopeful, whether you're a college student at home, doing the very best you can, whether you are an adult taking online classes with children at home, learning online and doing the best you can with that while juggling virtual jobs or losing your job, taking care of an aging parent, taking care of children or adults with any kind of physical limitations, mental health issues, whatever it is, fill in the blank for yourself. I hope that today, on this day, you can take even 1 minute, preferably 5 or 10, but if you can take even one, to step out of that, gerbil on crack mode, just step out of it, to take a minute to show yourself kindness and compassion, to treat yourself as you would treat your best friend. I wish that for you today. This is Kimberly Quinn signing off from Northern Vermont. Have a mindful day.